It happened on a sticky July afternoon when the sky hung low and heavy over Piedmont Park, the kind of day where the air clings to your skin and the cicadas buzz so loud you can feel it in your bones. And I was there with my Nana, same as most Saturdays, eating cold-cut sandwiches and watching people pass by while she did her crossword, and I read one of the fantasy books I'd borrowed from the tiny library in our complex's laundry room, the ones with dragons and girls with swords and crowns, and magic spells I like to pretend I had too, just not the kind that ever seemed to work in real life. When I saw him, this little boy, couldn't have been more than 3, white blonde curls and jelly-smeared cheeks, waddling too close to the edge of the pond near the duck feeders. No adults in sight, no one paying him any mind, and I froze for a second, because I wasn't sure it was real, like maybe someone would step in, but nobody did. So I dropped my book and ran, hard and fast, just as he slipped on the mossy edge and pitched forward with this weird slow-motion grace like a doll falling, and I grabbed him by the back of his little shirt and yanked, hard, falling on my knees in the process, but it worked. He didn't go under, just got his feet wet, and I sat back in the grass, heart thudding, still holding his hand while he blinked at me like he didn't know what just happened. And that's when I heard her voice, sharp and slicing like a nail through glass. "Get away from him," and I turned to see a woman in oversized sunglasses and a spotless white linen dress barreling toward me, with 2 men trailing behind her like bodyguards, yelling as if I'd done something terrible. "Don't touch him. What are you doing to my son?" And everything inside me cracked open, because I knew that look, that voice, that fear dressed up as fury, and I didn't even have time to answer before she was yanking the boy out of my hands and checking him like I poisoned him or something. If you agree that no kid should be treated like a criminal for doing the right thing, just because of how they look, like and subscribe. I still feel the sting of her glare in my throat sometimes, like a swallowed stone, and it got worse when the cops showed up 5 minutes later, called by a concerned parent who said a suspicious person had tried to grab her child. And there I was, wet from the knees down, hands shaking, holding a torn piece of sandwich bag in one hand and a soaked book in the other, while Officer Billings, name stitched right above his pen, asked me to step over here and told my Nana to remain calm, which only made her angrier. Her lips pressed so tight they disappeared, and she kept saying, "My baby saved that boy's life. You should be thanking her." But nobody seemed to care, not Cassandra Fairbanks. Not the 2 cops who kept looking at me like they were waiting for me to confess to something that never happened. Not even the folks walking by who either stared like it was a show or avoided eye contact like they didn't want to be in it. And I tried to explain, I really did. Told them I just saw him about to fall in and I didn't think, I just moved. But Cassandra, the boy's mom, interrupted me mid-sentence with this fake trembling voice saying, "Well, I don't know what her intentions were, but you just can't be too careful these days." And I knew what she meant without her saying it. I was a poor little black girl from the South Side, and her baby was blonde and blue-eyed and born with a trust fund. And even if I'd saved his life, she couldn't imagine me being the hero in that story. And after 30 humiliating minutes of standing in the sun like a suspect, they finally let me go with a half-hearted, "Thanks for your cooperation," and a warning to stick close to your guardian. Like I was the one who had wandered off. And as we walked away, I felt all the stares burn into my back, the worst kind. Not angry, not curious, just that look people give when they're relieved you're no longer their problem. And Nana squeezed my hand and muttered, "Lord sees all." But I didn't feel seen by anyone right then, not even God, just used up and spit out, and somehow punished for caring too much. In the part that haunts me the most wasn't the cops or the way people looked through me. It was Cassandra's voice when she scooped up her kid and walked off, muttering, "Honestly, where are the parents?" Like my Nana wasn't standing right there, like I wasn't a person with a name and a heartbeat and a story, like I was just some background noise in her day at the park. And that hurt worse than anything, because I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just didn't want to watch a little boy drown. After that day in the park, everything changed but also didn't. Like I kept waiting for the world to tilt in some big way, for someone to say, "You did a brave thing, Alana," or even just look me in the eye without suspicion. But all that came was silence, awkward silences at school, half smiles from adults who had heard something but didn't know if it was safe to talk about, and whispers that followed me like the shadow of that moment. Some kids called me a hero, but not the way it's supposed to feel. More like it was a rumor, A weird myth you weren't supposed to say too loud. And I kept hearing bits and pieces, how Cassandra Fairbanks, yeah, the woman who screamed at me, was married to Daniel Fairbanks, the tech guy, like that one, who'd spoken at my school last year about coding and success and grit and innovation. All the words grown folks throw around, but don't seem to apply to kids like me. And apparently he was furious, not at me, but at her, because he'd seen the park footage, the raw security feed the city quietly sent him when he requested it through his legal team. And the next thing I knew, 3 days later, he showed up on our porch in a sharp gray suit that didn't look like it belonged on our street, with a manila folder under one arm, and a look on his face like he didn't want to be there, but had to be. And Nana made him sit on the plastic-covered couch and offered him lemon tea, and he told us he was deeply sorry for the way things were handled, that he'd reviewed the tape dozens of times, and what I did was not only heroic, it was instinctual kindness, and that I had more humanity in my 12-year-old bones than some adults he knew in boardrooms. And then he pulled out the folder, which held a check, 5 figures long, and pushed it toward Nana saying, "For your troubles." But she looked him square in the eye and said, "My grandbaby's not for sale," and I've never loved her more in that moment. Then he cleared his throat and asked if we'd be okay with him issuing a public statement, something that could control the narrative and honor your granddaughter. And Nana said, "You do what your conscience tells you." But what his conscience actually told him must have been complicated, because a week passed, then another, and while I waited for something, anything, to happen, all I saw was Cassandra on the local news, hair perfect, dress ironed, talking about how grateful she was that her son was miraculously spared at the park. No mention of me, just vague praise for unseen angels. And I wanted to scream at the TV, "I'm not invisible." But I stayed quiet. Even when Miss Tasha from across the hall said she knew someone who worked at WXAL Channel 8, and that they tried to pitch my story, but it got pulled by someone higher up, and the rumor was the station didn't want to open themselves to liability by pointing fingers at a prominent family. And that's when I realized, even when you do the right thing, they'll find a way to keep you small, to keep you silent. And I probably would have stayed that way if it weren't for Mr. Ramos, my civics teacher, who asked if I was okay after class and let me cry in his empty room for 10 minutes before saying, "You don't need a headline to know who you are." And he was the one who connected with a local community journalist named Ayanna Hughes, who sat with us at our kitchen table and recorded everything I said, with tears in her eyes the whole time, and she promised she'd pitch the story to real platforms, real ones. But just like before, every editor passed. Too risky, too sensitive, too black girl in the wrong kind of neighborhood. And I was ready to give up, ready to let it sink like a stone in my chest forever, until a girl named Maureen, who'd been feeding ducks at the park that day, sent a message to the school's Instagram account saying she had a video, raw phone footage she never showed anyone because she thought it didn't matter, but now that she'd seen Cassandra on TV claiming divine intervention, she knew it did. And that shaky 78-second video, me running, grabbing the boy, Cassandra screaming, the moment everything flipped, got uploaded by someone anonymous on Reddit with the title, "This little girl saved a toddler, got treated like a criminal," and it spread like fire in dry grass, spreading faster than truth usually does, and suddenly my face was everywhere, blurred sometimes, sometimes not, depending on who posted, but the moment was out. There, undeniable, raw and real, and I thought maybe, finally, someone would say something that felt like justice. The first time I saw Cassandra again after the park wasn't in court, or at some apology lunch, or even by accident. It was at City Hall, under stage lights, surrounded by cameras, where the mayor handed me a blue velvet box with a pen that read, "Civic Hero," and people stood clapping like they'd always believed in me, like none of them had looked the other way when I cried in public or got side-eyed on the bus the week after. And as I stood there in my new dress, the one Nana saved up for, holding the award with both hands so I wouldn't drop it, I heard murmurs ripple through the crowd. Then the flash of press cameras turned toward the left of the stage, and there she was, Cassandra Fairbanks, standing stiff beside her husband. Her face arranged into something polite, lips too tight, eyes blinking fast, probably rehearsing some statement her PR team fed her. And the mayor, not knowing the full storm behind the curtain, invited her up for a reconciliation moment, like this was some Disney movie ending, and she stepped forward, heels tapping like a ticking clock, and extended her hand to me like we were strangers at a fundraiser. And I looked at it, really looked at it, remembering how that same hand yanked her child from mine like I was poison, and how her voice pierced the air with, "Get away from him," and how she never once said, "Thank you," just fear and implication. And I didn't take her hand, not out of spite, but because I didn't need to. I nodded instead, and that tiny gesture, silent, steady, refusing to perform forgiveness, hit harder than anything I could have said, and the cameras caught it all. My stillness, her awkward pause, the flicker of embarrassment behind her eyes like someone seeing their reflection for the first time in years, and later, that image went everywhere, even more viral than the rescue video, me standing proud beside the woman who tried to erase me, now frozen beside a girl the world had finally decided to see. And in that moment, I didn't feel small or angry or scared. I felt like the girl in my fantasy books, the one with the quiet power, the one who saves the kingdom but doesn't need the crown.